In this video, I want to share with you something that is breaking down further a key distinction in, I think, what allows your show to reach its potential for growth. And I think some people underestimate how big their show can be, and some people overestimate how big their show will be. And the key comes down to education versus entertainment. Okay, so entertainment podcasts are obviously some of the most popular ones, like comedy podcasts and things like that, true crime shows. They're the highest reach possible purely because they are applicable to almost everybody. Even if you don't like true crime, you are still somebody who could be entertained by that, versus an education podcast. Let's say it was geared towards criminal defense lawyers, right? Okay, well, if you are not a criminal defense lawyer, or you don't have any interest in being one or becoming one, or let's say you are a defense lawyer but you already know this information, that content does not apply to you, right? It's not for you. And so what you're doing naturally by focusing on education is cutting out a lot of your audience. But that's actually a good thing, because you don't want an inflated number of subscribers and downloads and people who are just like casual viewers. They're not actual buyers down the line. Like it's just not an aligned audience, right? And the reason I think this distinction was key to make is because a lot of people who are looking to start podcasts nowadays, and I'm experiencing this from the calls I'm hopping on, the messages that I'm getting, right? A lot of these people are trying to start podcasts that are going to benefit their business, right? So whether it's enterprise companies or solopreneurs, you want to get more customers out of this. And I think a lot of people are feeling like they need to be entertainers or performers in order to achieve that goal. And a lot of the advice that you're seeing, or a lot of the top shows that you see, are really in the entertainment category. And so the approach for that is different than what you would do for education-based podcasts. And your expectations also have to be slightly adjusted, right? So it's perfectly fine. Then, by the way, this is something I didn't invent, by the way. It's something that was referenced in Alex Hormozi's video, where they analyzed 35,000 pieces of content, all the stuff they've been doing over the past year, and highlighting some of the shifts in their media strategy that they are going to be making and that they have since, which has been fun to watch. But this was referenced in that video, and it was a way to basically reset the expectations on views. Like, just because it has more views does not mean that it's better, right? What it means when something has less views or less downloads is that it's more specific. So for example, I have made a video, one of the first videos I made for this channel years ago was around troubleshooting an Apple Podcast submission error that would come up. And the main reason I honestly made that video was because I kept running into it every time I was launching a show for a client or myself. And it was really annoying because I would forget every week, like, what did I do last week to overcome this issue? Until I was tired of wasting time, and I was like, all right, I'm going to put this in a video. I mean, it started out as kind of just an SOP, and then I turned it into a video because I was like, there has to be people who are running into this. And there was actually no great answers on solving this, even when you got in touch with Apple. So I got in touch with Apple. I told them, look, I'm going to make a video on this. I do this all the time, and these issues I'm experiencing, like, what do you recommend, right? So I got a good answer, and I went on to make that video. Now, think about how you would not even click on that video if you were not trying to launch your show on Apple. Even if you're, let's say, thinking about starting a pod, but you're not quite in that process, that video is not actually really applicable to you just yet, right? It's only applicable once you face that error. So that's an example of an education-based piece of content that is very specific, right? It hasn't gotten hundreds of thousands of views, but it has gotten several thousand, right? And what happens is, within those several thousand, the types of reactions that you get on those videos are like, oh my gosh, you're a lifesaver. Thank you so much. Like, people are so genuinely thankful towards you because you helped them solve something that was like, I've wasted hours on this. I've wasted days thinking about this and trying to figure it out, and I couldn't, right? So the education-based pieces of content are typically focused on targeting those types of problems and people, okay? It's a different mindset than just being like, okay, how do we create a video that's going to reach the most amount of people possible? right? Because in entertainment, there's an element of relatability that you are really focusing on, right? Which is, okay, this is a true crime show. We want it to reach as many people as possible. How do we make it somewhat relatable, right? You have to really architect some of those things to get the reach that you want, right? And I think that distinction was just so key in hearing, because it's not only just like it's something we've all intuitively kind of known, right? But it's something that is good to now have language to it and be made explicit, because it's like we all try to do this, right? Most people who are creating content are not just doing so for entertainment. They're doing it because they want to see some business growth out of this. They want it to affect their products or services, right? But when you look at all the advice out there, it's coming from people who are in the entertainment niche or have entertainment based content and channels. The biggest channel that I edited for was 13.2 million subs, and it was actually a famous Italian musician, right? Another channel that I've helped grow in 57 days to 100K subs, and then in 13 months we hit about 450K subs, is also an entertainment-ish based channel, right? So that part was something I started to see happen more and more in my work, where I'm like, wow, these are growing really, really fast, right? Like, what's preventing some of the lawyers or insurance companies or chiropractors, like what's preventing their stuff from growing at the same rate? And part of it is they're focused on creating different kinds of content, right? Now, I think this is not just like an excuse for you to be like, oh, it's not getting any views and I don't need to change anything about my strategy, right? What it's doing is shifting the way that you approach this, because if you went into it having this like false sense of hope, like, oh, I have an education-based pod, but I want this to hit 1 million, 2 million, 3 million subscribers, like you're missing the whole point, right? Because your whole goal, let's say, was to help business opportunities, right? So now you're focusing on something that entertainment channels typically focus on, which is the most amount of reach possible, versus for an education-based channel that's driving towards business goals, you are trying to increase your revenue per view, not just total views, right? So that's a key distinction that I want you to keep in mind and really think about in your own content. It's like, when you get one customer from 27 views or 87 views, and I've had this happen, by the way, like people who, called me a year later after watching a video that had 27 views at the time, but because it was just so specific to their problem, their situation, that it was like, oh, of course, like you get it, right? I displayed an element of you get it. And so that is more impressive, right? When you have 1 out of 83 converting at that rate, versus, okay, you got one customer, but you've got 100,000 subscribers. That's less impressive. It's like at 100,000 subs, you're like, yeah, you should be getting customers. You should be getting leads and all this other stuff. But to do something with a very small number to make it convert, another example is this like download that I had off of this video that was connected to a free funnel. And it's like, I remember in the first several months of this video, it was like it had 84 views, right? It wasn't a lot, but like 50%, very close to 50% of the people who watched that video actually went to the landing page, and not just went there, but downloaded. Like they actually successfully downloaded the freebie. And so that ratio of conversion is pretty crazy, right? 50% of these people are actually going on to give me their info. And so yes, it wasn't a lot at the time, but fast forward, for whatever reason, it's like now that video's been around for like at least a year. That same like download that I have, there's at least 3 a day that comes from that video. And that video still, it's like, it's got more views now, but it's nowhere near like tens of thousands even. So the efficiency of that conversion is wild, because if you've made it convert at 50% when you had like 84 views and 42 had signed up for your freebie, imagine what happens as YouTube and podcast platforms distribute that thing out further and further. I've found that YouTube specifically is very reliable in terms of scale. So when that does start getting more and more views, that conversion rate actually stayed very similar. I got more and more and more email subscribers as YouTube showed that video to more and more people. And it didn't have to be hundreds or thousands of people. It was literally, when it showed it to 10 extra people, I got 5 new subs. You know what I mean? So that type of conversion rate and thinking is what you're trying to do with some of your education based content, okay? Versus if I was making entertainment stuff, like the goal, yes, would be I'm judging it off of, how many views did this get? How many likes? How many YouTube subs did I get? And that's also helping like your ad revenue and sponsors and all that kind of stuff, because you're going for this mass amount of reach. But for 90% of us who are using media to kind of reach people and get them to want to do business with us, focusing on education-based content is going to be more profitable, right? And this is something that Hormozi discussed in that talk, which was if you basically like do entertainment content, you attract people who want more of that thing, versus if you do education content, yes, it's less people, but you attract more people who want that thing. And it often can be way, way, way more profitable per view, per subscriber, per everything, purely because of the nature of what's being discussed and how it is aligned and connected to some of your products or services. I hope this was useful in helping kind of recalibrate some of your expectations with podcast growth and podcast potential, right? And also not just writing it off because, oh man, this is an education-based idea and it's not going to get a ton of traction, so I'm just not going to do it, right? It's really knowing which camp you're in and what you're creating this for. Because I still, to this day, there's a mix of mostly education-based content that I work on, but on occasion I get a lot of entertainment ideas and people who are willing to execute on that stuff. And, it's a different strategy, different expectations, different commitment level, right? But it has way more potential for, the reach and getting to a place where like that 100K subs and 450K sub channel that I worked on, I told you, that person was able to quit their job that was in a very high paying career and company and replace it with fully ad income, right? That type of stuff is possible when you have entertainment based content versus when you have education based